In the grand estate of Willowbrook Manor, where secrets whispered through marble corridors and family loyalties ran deeper than ancient bloodlines, a single email would shatter the carefully constructed facade of England's most prominent aristocratic family. What began as a routine security check would unveil a web of deception, jealousy, and hidden truths that threatened to destroy everything the Ashworth family had built over 3 centuries. When 25-year-old tech specialist Marcus Webb was hired to upgrade the manor's digital security systems, he never imagined he would stumble upon encrypted communications that would expose the darkest secrets between 2 sisters-in-law whose public smiles masked a private war. The discovery would force everyone at Willowbrook Manor to confront a simple yet devastating question. How well do we really know the people we trust the most? The morning mist hung low over Willowbrook Manor's perfectly manicured gardens as Marcus Webb pulled his modest sedan through the wrought iron gates. The young IT specialist had been contracted by Lord Charles Ashworth himself to modernize the estate's aging computer systems, a job that promised to pay his student loans and then some. As he approached the imposing Georgian facade with its towering columns and pristine white stone, Marcus couldn't help but feel intimidated by the sheer grandeur of one of England's most prestigious family estates. Lady Camilla Ashworth, the family matriarch and wife to Lord Charles, greeted Marcus at the ornate front door with the kind of practiced smile that came from decades of hosting charity galas and political fundraisers. At 58, she maintained an elegant composure that spoke of breeding and careful cultivation. Her silver hair was pulled back in a sophisticated chignon, and her navy blue dress was perfectly pressed, not a thread out of place. "Mr. Webb, welcome to Willowbrook Manor," she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "Charles has told me wonderful things about your technical expertise. We're quite behind the times here, I'm afraid." As Marcus shook her hand, he noticed the slight tension around her eyes, the way her smile didn't quite reach them. It was subtle, but his years of reading people through their digital habits had made him observant of human behavior in all its forms. "Thank you for having me, Lady Ashworth. I'm excited to help modernize your systems while preserving the security and privacy your family requires." Lady Camilla led him through corridors lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors, and into what she called the morning room, where afternoon sunlight streamed through tall windows overlooking the estate's rose gardens. It was here that she explained the scope of work needed. "We have several computers throughout the manor that need updating," she began, settling into an antique chair with practiced grace. "The main office, Charles's study, the library, and of course, my personal workspace. We also need to ensure our email systems are properly secured. With Charles' position in Parliament and our various charitable endeavors, discretion is paramount." Marcus nodded, already mentally cataloging the work ahead. "I'll need to examine each system individually to assess what updates are necessary. Some older systems might need complete replacement, while others may just need software upgrades and security patches. Of course, I'll have Mrs. Henderson, our housekeeper, show you around and provide access to each room. Please feel free to work at whatever pace suits you best. Charles and I will be in London for most of this week, so you'll have the run of the place." As Lady Camilla spoke, Marcus noticed a subtle change in her demeanor when she mentioned her personal workspace. It was barely perceptible, but her shoulders tensed slightly, and she glanced briefly toward the window before returning her attention to him. After Lady Camilla departed for London in a sleek black Bentley, Marcus began his systematic examination of the manor's computer systems. The main office computer was straightforward enough, running outdated software that needed updating but presented no unusual challenges. Lord Charles's study contained a more sophisticated setup, clearly used for parliamentary research and correspondence, but again, nothing out of the ordinary. It was when Marcus reached Lady Camilla's private workspace on the 3rd day that things became interesting. Located in what was once a smaller drawing room on the 2nd floor, the space had been converted into an elegant home office. Cream-colored walls were adorned with tasteful artwork, and a mahogany desk sat positioned to overlook the manor's expansive grounds. The computer itself was newer than the others, but as Marcus began running his diagnostic programs, he discovered something unusual. The system had been configured with multiple user accounts, which wasn't strange in itself, but the level of encryption and security measures in place seemed excessive for typical personal use. As he worked to update the security software, Marcus encountered a series of encrypted email folders that required specialized decryption tools to access. Protocol dictated that he should ask permission before accessing personal files, but Lady Camilla was unreachable in London, and the encryption was interfering with the security updates he needed to install. It was then that he saw the folder structure that would haunt him for weeks to come. Dozens of email threads marked with cryptic subject lines and sent to an address he didn't recognize. The first email he accidentally opened while running a file integrity check made his blood run cold. The subject line read simply, "Our Kate problem continues," and the content that followed revealed a side of Lady Camilla that contradicted everything about her public persona. The email, sent just 3 weeks prior, contained detailed observations about Catherine Ashworth, Lord Charles's daughter-in-law, who had married his son William the 2 years earlier. But these weren't the fond observations of a mother-in-law getting to know her new family member. Instead, they read like intelligence reports, cataloging Catherine's daily routines, her friendships, her shopping habits, and even her private conversations with William. Marcus felt his hands trembling as he read line after line of what could only be described as surveillance notes. Lady Camilla had apparently enlisted the help of several staff members to monitor Catherine's activities, and the level of detail was disturbing. The emails described everything from what Catherine ate for breakfast to who she spoke with on the phone, complete with duration and apparent mood assessments. One particularly chilling passage read, "Catherine spent 47 minutes on the phone with her sister yesterday evening. Henderson reports that she was crying during the latter portion of the call. This weakness continues to be exploitable. Her emotional instability makes her unsuitable for public appearances with the family. William must be made to see this before it damages our reputation further." Marcus realized he was looking at evidence of a systematic campaign to undermine and potentially remove Catherine from the Ashworth family. But as he continued reading, he discovered that the situation was far more complex and sinister than simple family disapproval. The email recipient, whose address was masked behind layers of forwarding, was apparently someone with significant influence over family decisions. The tone of Lady Camilla's messages suggested she was reporting to someone rather than simply venting her frustrations to a friend. "The Catherine situation requires more decisive action. Read another email. William's attachment to her continues to strengthen despite our efforts. Her influence over him threatens the carefully planned merger with the Pemberton family interests. We cannot allow sentiment to override decades of strategic planning." As Marcus pieced together more of the correspondence, a picture emerged of a family where marriages weren't based on love but on calculated political and financial alliances. Catherine's crime, it seemed, was that she had married William for love rather than strategy, and her genuine affection for him was interfering with plans that had been in motion since before she entered the family. The most disturbing revelation came in an email dated just 1 week earlier. Lady Camilla had written, "Phase 2 preparations are complete. Catherine's medical records have been obtained through our contact at St. Mary's Hospital. Her history of anxiety and depression provides the necessary foundation for what comes next. Dr. Whitmore has agreed to cooperate in exchange for our continued donations to his research foundation." Marcus felt sick as the implications became clear. This wasn't just about family disapproval or social manipulation. Lady Camilla and her unknown correspondent were planning something that could seriously harm Catherine's health and well-being. He quickly copied the relevant files to an encrypted drive, knowing he needed time to think about what he had discovered. The technical work was nearly complete, but Marcus realized he was no longer just updating computer systems. He had stumbled upon what amounted to a conspiracy against an innocent woman who had simply fallen in love with the wrong man. As he packed his equipment that evening, Marcus couldn't shake the image of Catherine Ashworth from his mind. He had seen her photograph in several family portraits throughout the manor. A young woman with kind eyes and a genuine smile that contrasted sharply with the calculated expressions of the other family members. The drive back to his small London apartment felt endless as Marcus wrestled with what he knew. He had evidence of what appeared to be a systematic plan to psychologically and possibly physically harm someone, but the people involved were among England's most powerful and well-connected families. Going to the police seemed like the right thing to do, but Marcus knew that without more concrete evidence of actual crimes being committed, the word of a freelance IT worker wouldn't carry much weight, against the Ashworth family name. That night, as Marcus sat in his cramped flat reviewing the copied files, he made a decision that would change everything. He couldn't ignore what he had discovered, but he also couldn't act rashly. Catherine Ashworth was in danger, but she didn't even know it. The emails suggested that whatever Phase 2 entailed, it would begin soon. Marcus realized he needed to find a way to warn Catherine without exposing himself or putting her in more immediate danger. But first, he needed to understand exactly who Lady Camilla was working with and what their ultimate plan involved. The encrypted emails he had accessed were just the tip of the iceberg, and the full scope of the conspiracy was still hidden beneath layers of careful planning and aristocratic privilege. As he fell asleep that night, Marcus couldn't have imagined that his discovery would soon set in motion events that would expose secrets reaching far beyond Willowbrook Manor, touching the highest levels of British society and threatening to topple carefully constructed facades that had taken generations to build. Part 2. Catherine Ashworth had always prided herself on her intuition, a quality that had served her well throughout her 27 years of life. Growing up in a middle-class family in Yorkshire, she had learned to read people's intentions and navigate social situations with a combination of genuine warmth and careful observation. But nothing could have prepared her for the subtle warfare that existed within the walls of Willowbrook Manor. Since marrying William Ashworth 18 months ago, Catherine had felt increasingly isolated, despite being surrounded by luxury and privilege. What she had initially attributed to the normal adjustment period of joining a prominent family had gradually revealed itself as something far more deliberate and sinister. The morning after Marcus Webb completed his work at the manor, Catherine sat in the conservatory overlooking the estate's gardens, trying to make sense of the growing unease that had been building inside her for weeks. Small incidents that she had dismissed as coincidences were starting to form a pattern that she couldn't ignore. There was the matter of her medication. Catherine had been prescribed anti-anxiety medication by her London physician after experiencing panic attacks during the intense media scrutiny following her engagement announcement. The prescription was straightforward, and she had been managing her condition successfully. However, in recent weeks, she had noticed that the medication seemed to have different effects than usual. Instead of calming her anxiety, she often felt more confused and emotionally unstable after taking her prescribed dose. Dr. Jexis does hypericetatic. Whitmore, the family physician that Lady Camilla had insisted she see instead of her London doctor, had recently suggested increasing her dosage despite Catherine's protests that the medication wasn't helping. When she expressed her concerns, he had dismissed them as typical anxiety-related fears and suggested that her judgment about her own mental state couldn't be trusted. Anxiety disorders often make patients feel that their treatment isn't working properly, Dr. Whitmore had explained during their last appointment. It's important that you trust the medical professionals who have your best interests at heart. But Catherine's instincts told her something was wrong. She had been managing her anxiety successfully for years before joining the Ashworth family, and the recent deterioration in her mental state coincided too perfectly with her increased integration into family activities. The phone call that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning while Lady Camilla was attending a charity committee meeting in London. Catherine was alone in the manor except for the household staff when her mobile rang, displaying an unknown number. "Mrs. Ashworth?" The voice was young, male, and nervous. "My name is Marcus Webb. I did some computer work at your home recently. I need to speak with you about something important, but not over the phone. Can you meet me somewhere private?" Catherine hesitated. She didn't recognize the name, but something in the caller's tone suggested genuine urgency rather than threat. "What is this regarding, Mr. Webb?" "It concerns your safety, Mrs. Ashworth. I've discovered something that you need to know about, but I can't discuss it over the phone. Your calls might be monitored." The suggestion that her phone calls were being monitored should have seemed paranoid, but Catherine realized it actually explained several recent incidents. Conversations she had thought were private had somehow become known to Lady Camilla, who would make subtle references to things Catherine was certain she had never mentioned to anyone at the manor. "Where would you suggest we meet?" Catherine asked, surprising herself with her willingness to trust this stranger. "There's a small cafe called Millfield House about 20 minutes from your location. It's quiet, and we can talk without being overheard. Can you be there in an hour?" Catherine agreed, telling Mrs. Henderson that she was going to visit the local shops. As she drove through the winding country roads toward the meeting location, she felt both anxious and strangely hopeful. For months, she had felt like she was losing her mind, questioning her own perceptions and memories. The possibility that someone else had noticed something wrong gave her the first sense of validation she had experienced in weeks. Millfield House turned out to be a converted Georgian home that now served as a quiet tea room, frequented mainly by elderly locals and the occasional tourist. Marcus Webb was easy to identify, a nervous-looking young man sitting alone at a corner table with a laptop bag at his feet, and the unmistakable demeanor of someone carrying a heavy burden. Catherine approached his table cautiously, still uncertain about the wisdom of meeting a complete stranger based on a cryptic phone call. "Mrs. Ashworth, thank you for coming. I know this must seem strange, but after you hear what I have to tell you, I think you'll understand why I couldn't risk discussing it over the phone." Marcus looked exhausted, as if he hadn't slept in days. As Catherine settled into the chair across from him, she noticed the way he constantly glanced around the room, checking to see who else was present. "I was hired to update the computer systems at Willowbrook Manor last week," Marcus began, speaking quietly. "During that work, I discovered some files that I believe put you in serious danger." Over the next hour, Marcus carefully explained what he had found while maintaining the anonymity of his discovery. He couldn't reveal that he had accessed private emails without permission, so he framed his knowledge as having overheard conversations and observed suspicious behaviors during his time at the manor. "Mrs. Ashworth, I believe you're being systematically poisoned, or at least given medication that's been altered without your knowledge. I also believe your personal activities are being monitored and reported to someone outside the family." Catherine felt the world tilt around her as Marcus's words confirmed her worst fears. Who would do such a thing, and why? "I can't prove this yet, but I believe Lady Camilla is involved, possibly working with others who see your marriage to William as problematic, for reasons that have nothing to do with you personally." The conversation that followed was one of the most difficult of Catherine's life. Marcus carefully shared what he had learned about the systematic campaign against her, the monitoring of her activities, and the apparent plan to undermine her mental health through medical manipulation. The medication changes, the isolation from your friends and family, the constant subtle criticism disguised as concern. It's all designed to make you question your own sanity and eventually either leave William voluntarily or be removed from the family through other means. Catherine realized that Marcus was describing exactly what she had been experiencing: the gradual erosion of her confidence, the increasing episodes of confusion and emotional instability, the way her own husband had begun to question her mental state. It all fit the pattern Marcus was describing. "What should I do?" Catherine asked, feeling both terrified and relieved to finally have someone validate her experiences. "First, stop taking any medication that's been prescribed or provided by Dr. Whitmore. If you need anxiety medication, see your original doctor in London. Second, be very careful about what you eat or drink at the manor. If possible, prepare your own meals or eat only food that you've seen prepared fresh." Marcus also advised Catherine to vary her routines, making it harder for anyone monitoring her activities to predict her movements. Most importantly, he suggested that she begin documenting everything unusual that happened to her, creating a record that might be useful if she decided to involve law enforcement. "The people involved in this have significant power and influence," Marcus warned. "If you decide to fight back, you need to be prepared for them to escalate their efforts. They've invested too much in this plan to simply abandon it because you've become aware of what's happening." As their meeting concluded, Marcus gave Catherine a secure phone number where she could reach him if she needed help or discovered additional information. They agreed to meet again in a week's time to assess how things had developed. Driving back to Willowbrook Manor, Catherine felt like she was seeing her life clearly for the first time in months. The beautiful estate that had once seemed like a fairy tale setting now felt like an elegant prison. Every staff member she passed in the corridors was potentially part of the surveillance network that had been monitoring her every move. That evening, when William returned from his London office, Catherine studied her husband's face carefully as they sat down to dinner. She loved him deeply, but she realized she needed to determine whether he was aware of what was happening to her, or if he was another victim of his family's manipulations. "William, have you noticed anything different about my behavior lately?" Catherine asked, keeping her tone casual. "Well, you have seemed more anxious recently," William replied, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Mother suggested that perhaps you should consider seeing Dr. Whitmore more frequently. She's worried about you, and frankly, so am I." The concern in William's eyes appeared genuine, but Catherine realized that his mother's influence over his perceptions had been carefully cultivated. Lady Camilla had been subtly poisoning William's view of his wife while simultaneously undermining Catherine's mental and physical health. "What specifically have you noticed that worries you?" Catherine pressed. "You've been forgetting things, getting confused about conversations we've had. Last week, you insisted that we had plans to visit your sister, but we had never discussed any such plans. And you've been more emotional than usual, crying over small things that wouldn't normally upset you." Catherine felt a chill as she realized how effective the campaign against her had been. The medication tampering and psychological manipulation had created exactly the symptoms that would make everyone around her question her mental stability. That night, as William slept beside her, Catherine lay awake planning her next moves. She couldn't simply confront Lady Camilla without more evidence, and she couldn't involve William until she was certain he wasn't part of the conspiracy. Most importantly, she needed to protect herself from further harm while she gathered the proof she would need to expose what was happening. Catherine's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Be very careful. Things are accelerating faster than expected. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. Trust no one at the manor." The message was from Marcus, and its urgent tone made Catherine's heart race. Whatever Lady Camilla and her collaborators had planned, they were moving into the next stage of their operation. Catherine realized she was running out of time to protect herself and expose the truth before irreversible damage was done. As she stared at the ceiling of the elegant bedroom that had become her prison, Catherine made a decision that would determine not only her own fate, but the future of everyone connected to Willowbrook Manor. She would no longer be a passive victim in someone else's carefully orchestrated plan. Tomorrow, she would begin fighting back. Part 3. The morning sun cast long shadows across the grounds of Willowbrook Manor as Catherine implemented the first phase of her counterattack. Armed with Marcus Webb's warnings and her own growing understanding of the conspiracy against her, she had spent the sleepless hours before dawn planning how to gather evidence while protecting herself from further harm. Her first stop was the kitchen, where she found Mrs. Henderson, the longtime housekeeper, preparing breakfast with her usual efficient precision. Catherine had always sensed that Mrs. Henderson disapproved of her, but she had attributed it to the natural resistance of longtime staff to change. Now she wondered if the housekeeper's coldness stemmed from more deliberate motives. "Good morning, Mrs. Henderson. I think I'll prepare my own breakfast this morning. I've been trying to eat more mindfully lately." The housekeeper's reaction was subtle but telling. A brief flash of surprise crossed her features, followed by what appeared to be concern. "Of course, Mrs. Ashworth. Shall I assist you with anything?" "No, thank you. I prefer to handle it myself." Catherine maintained a pleasant tone while carefully observing Mrs. Henderson's behavior. The woman lingered in the kitchen longer than usual, seemingly finding busy work that kept her nearby while Catherine prepared a simple meal of fresh fruit and yogurt from containers she opened herself. After breakfast, Catherine retreated to the small sitting room that she had claimed as her personal space. It was here that she began implementing Marcus's suggestion to document everything unusual that happened to her. Using a notebook hidden behind other books on her shelf, she started recording dates, times, and details of incidents that had seemed insignificant at the time, but now appeared to be part of a larger pattern. The medication irregularities were the most concerning evidence. Catherine had kept all her prescription bottles, and careful examination revealed subtle differences in the pills that she had previously attributed to different manufacturing batches. Some tablets were slightly different in color or texture, and she realized these variations corresponded with the days when her symptoms had been most severe. As she worked, Catherine's phone buzzed with a text message from her sister Emma, who lived in Edinburgh. "Haven't heard from you in weeks. William said you've been too unwell to talk. Are you all right?" Catherine stared at the message in confusion. She had spoken with Emma just 4 days earlier, and William had been in London at the time. The conversation had been normal, with no mention of illness or inability to communicate. Yet somehow Emma had been told that Catherine was too sick to maintain contact with her family. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Someone had been intercepting her communications and lying to her family about her condition. This meant the isolation she had been experiencing wasn't just psychological manipulation. It was active sabotage of her relationships with people who might offer support or ask inconvenient questions. Catherine immediately called Emma, keeping her voice steady despite the rage building inside her. "Emma, it's me. I got your text. When did William tell you I was unwell?" "Catherine, I'm so relieved to hear from you. William called 3 days ago and said you'd been having severe anxiety attacks and weren't up to talking to anyone. He sounded really worried about you." "I haven't had any severe anxiety attacks, and I definitely didn't ask William to tell people I couldn't talk to them. In fact, I spoke with you on Saturday, remember? We discussed your job interview." There was a long pause before Emma responded, her voice filled with growing concern. "Catherine, I haven't spoken with you in over 3 weeks. Are you sure you're all right? You sound confused." The conversation that followed was devastating for Catherine. According to Emma, William had been calling family members and close friends for weeks, explaining that Catherine was experiencing a mental health crisis and wouldn't be able to maintain normal contact. He had been so convincing that everyone had accepted his explanations without question. But Catherine knew with absolute certainty that she had been having regular conversations with Emma and others. Either she was losing her mind more completely than she had realized, or someone had been making those calls using her phone when she wasn't aware of it. After ending the call with Emma, Catherine began a systematic check of her phone records. What she discovered made her feel physically sick. There were numerous calls logged to her contacts during times when she knew she had been elsewhere or asleep. Someone had been using her phone to maintain the illusion of normal contact while telling people in separate conversations that she was too unwell to communicate. The sophistication of the deception was breathtaking. Whoever was orchestrating this campaign had anticipated that Catherine might eventually become suspicious and had created a situation where any attempt to prove her sanity would be undermined by evidence suggesting the opposite. As Catherine struggled to process the implications of what she had discovered, she heard the distinctive sound of Lady Camilla's Bentley pulling up the circular drive. Her mother-in-law had returned from London earlier than expected, and Catherine suspected this wasn't a coincidence. Lady Camilla entered the manor with her usual composed elegance, but Catherine noticed a tension in her movements that hadn't been there before. When she greeted Catherine in the main hallway, her smile seemed forced, and her eyes held a watchful quality that made Catherine's skin crawl. "Catherine, dear, you look pale. Have you been taking your medication as Dr. Whitmore prescribed?" "I'm feeling much better, actually. I've decided to get a second opinion about my medication. I have an appointment with my original doctor in London tomorrow." The change in Lady Camilla's expression was instantaneous and revealing. For just a moment, her composed mask slipped, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "I'm not sure that's wise, dear. Doctor. Whitmore knows your case intimately, and changing doctors in the middle of treatment could be dangerous. Perhaps you should discuss this with William before making any hasty decisions. I appreciate your concern, but I feel quite capable of managing my own healthcare decisions." Catherine maintained a pleasant tone while observing Lady Camilla's reaction carefully. Her mother-in-law's discomfort was obvious to anyone who knew how to look for it. "Of course, dear. I just worry about you. We all do. You haven't seemed quite yourself lately, and making important decisions when you're not feeling well can lead to unfortunate consequences." The conversation continued for several more minutes, with Lady Camilla subtly questioning Catherine's judgment and mental state while expressing concern for her well-being. It was a masterful performance, but Catherine now recognized it for what it was: psychological manipulation designed to make her doubt her own perceptions and decisions. That evening, William returned from London in an unusually agitated state. Over dinner, he brought up Catherine's plan to see her original doctor, speaking as if Lady Camilla had briefed him on the conversation. "Mother mentioned that you want to change doctors. I have to say, I'm concerned about this decision. Dr. Whitmore has been very helpful in understanding your condition." "What exactly has Dr. Whitmore told you about my condition?" Catherine asked carefully. "He's explained that your anxiety has developed into something more serious. He's concerned about your grip on reality and your ability to make sound decisions. He thinks you might be developing symptoms of paranoid delusion." Catherine felt the room spin around her. The trap was even more sophisticated than she had imagined. Dr. Fasisico. Whitmore hadn't just been altering her medication. He had been building a medical case that she was mentally unstable and potentially dangerous to herself. "William, has it occurred to you that I might actually be quite sane, and that someone wants you to believe otherwise?" Catherine, that's exactly the kind of thinking that worries Dr. Person. Whitmore. You're seeing conspiracies where none exist. People who love you are trying to help, and you're interpreting their concern as some kind of attack. The conversation continued in circles, with William expressing genuine love and concern while simultaneously reinforcing every narrative that painted Catherine as mentally unstable. She realized that he truly believed he was protecting her, which made him a perfect, unwitting accomplice to whatever was being planned for her future. Late that night, after William had fallen asleep, Catherine received another text from Marcus. Emergency meeting tomorrow. New information suggests timeline has accelerated. Your life may be in immediate danger. Catherine stared at the message, feeling the walls closing in around her. Whatever phase 2 of Lady Camilla's plan involved, it was apparently about to begin. She had perhaps hours rather than days to gather evidence and find a way to protect herself. As she lay in bed beside her sleeping husband, Catherine made a decision that would determine everything that followed. She could no longer afford to play defense against an enemy who had spent months or possibly years planning her destruction. Tomorrow she would take the fight directly to Lady Camilla and whoever was helping her. But first, she needed to understand exactly who she was fighting and what they ultimately hoped to achieve. The emails Marcus had discovered were just the beginning. Somewhere in Willowbrook Manor was evidence of a conspiracy that reached far beyond family dynamics and personal grudges. Catherine spent the remaining hours before dawn preparing for what might be the most dangerous day of her life. She had no idea how far her enemies were willing to go to achieve their goals. But she was about to find out. The time for subtle observation and careful documentation was over. Tomorrow would bring either freedom or disaster, and Catherine was determined to face whatever came with her eyes wide open and her mind clear. Part 4. Dawn broke gray and cold over Willowbrook Manor as Catherine prepared for what she knew would be the most crucial day of her life. Armed with the evidence she had gathered and driven by desperation born of months of psychological torture, she was ready to confront the conspiracy that had nearly destroyed her sanity and her marriage. Her first move was to secure the help she would need for the confrontation ahead. Using the secure phone Marcus had given her, she arranged to meet him at a location 20 minutes from the manor. This time, however, she also contacted her sister Emma and asked her to drive down from Edinburgh immediately. "I need you to be here today," Catherine told Emma over the phone. "I can't explain everything right now, but I'm going to need witnesses for what I'm about to do, and I need people here who aren't connected to the Ashworth family."
Emma's voice was filled with worry.
"Catherine, you're scaring me. Are you in some kind of danger?" "Yes, but not the kind you might think. Just please trust me and come as quickly as you can. Bring David if possible." David was Emma's husband, a solicitor whose legal knowledge might prove invaluable. The meeting with Marcus took place at the same quiet cafe where they had first connected. This time, however, Marcus brought with him a manila folder filled with printed copies of the emails he had discovered, as well as additional evidence he had gathered through his own investigation. "I've been doing some research into the people mentioned in these emails," Marcus explained, spreading documents across their small table. "The situation is worse than we initially thought. The unknown correspondent that Lady Camilla had been communicating with was revealed to be Sir Edmund Pemberton, a wealthy industrialist whose family had been allies of the Ashworths for generations. The alliance between the families was both financial and political, involving business partnerships worth millions of pounds and shared investments in several major projects. Catherine's marriage to William disrupted a carefully planned arrangement," Marcus explained. "William was supposed to marry Sir Edmund's daughter, Victoria Pemberton. The marriage would have consolidated business interests and political influence that both families have been building toward for decades. The emails revealed that Lady Camilla and Sir Edmund had been planning to eliminate what they saw as the Catherine obstacle for months. The psychological manipulation and medical sabotage were designed to either drive Catherine away voluntarily or create grounds for having her declared mentally incompetent. Phase 2, which is beginning today, involves Dr. Whitmore declaring that Catherine poses a danger to herself and others," Marcus continued. "They have legal documents prepared to have her committed to a private psychiatric facility where she would be kept sedated and isolated until she either agrees to divorce William voluntarily or can be proven legally incompetent." Catherine felt sick as the full scope of the plan became clear. They're planning to have me committed today? According to the latest emails I intercepted, Dr. Whitmore is scheduled to arrive at the manor this afternoon with the necessary legal papers. Lady Camilla has arranged for William to be present, and they plan to convince him that immediate intervention is necessary for your safety. The evidence Marcus had gathered was damning, but Catherine realized they needed to catch the conspirators in the act if they hoped to expose them effectively. Simply presenting the evidence after the fact might not be enough to overcome the influence and connections that Lady Camilla and Sir Edmund possessed. We need to record what happens this afternoon, Catherine decided. If we can capture them discussing their real motives and methods, we'll have evidence that can't be dismissed or explained away. Marcus nodded, pulling a small recording device from his bag. I've brought equipment that can capture audio from a considerable distance. But you'll be taking an enormous risk. If they discover what you're doing, they might accelerate their timeline or take more drastic action. Catherine thought about the alternative, imagining herself drugged and confined in some private facility while her life and marriage were systematically dismantled around her. The risk of doing nothing is greater than the risk of fighting back. They spent the next hour planning how to position recording equipment throughout the manor and establish communication protocols that would allow Emma and David to document everything that happened. Catherine would wear a small transmitter that would allow the others to monitor conversations in real time. When Catherine returned to Willowbrook Manor, she found Lady Camilla in the morning room, speaking quietly on her mobile phone. The conversation ended abruptly when Catherine entered, and her mother-in-law's forced smile seemed especially brittle. "Catherine, dear, Dr. Whitmore will be visiting this afternoon. He's concerned about some test results and wants to discuss adjusting your treatment plan." "What test results?" "I haven't had any tests done recently." "Oh, the blood work he ordered last week. Don't you remember?" "He wanted to check how the medication was affecting your system." Catherine had no memory of any blood work, which meant either her memory was more compromised than she realized, or the tests had been conducted without her knowledge or consent. Given everything else she had discovered, the latter possibility seemed more likely. "I'd like to have my own doctor review any test results before making changes to my medication." Lady Camilla's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Catherine, I really think you need to trust the medical professionals who are trying to help you. This resistance to treatment is becoming concerning." Before Catherine could respond, they heard the sound of cars arriving in the drive. Emma and David had arrived earlier than expected, and their presence clearly surprised Lady Camilla. "Catherine, you didn't mention that you were expecting guests. My sister was worried about me after our conversation yesterday. I invited her to visit." The next few hours passed in a tense ballet of polite conversation and careful positioning. Catherine introduced Emma and David to Lady Camilla, explaining their visit as a spontaneous family gathering. Meanwhile, Marcus worked from a maintenance van parked near the manor to position recording equipment and monitor communications. William arrived home early, having been summoned by his mother under the pretense of a family emergency. His confusion at finding Catherine apparently healthy and entertaining guests was obvious, but Lady Camilla quickly pulled him aside for a private conversation. Catherine watched through the drawing room window as mother and son spoke intently in the garden. Even at a distance, she could see William's posture change from confusion to concern to what appeared to be reluctant agreement. Dr. Whitmore arrived precisely at 3 o'clock, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing an expression of professional gravity. He was accompanied by 2 men in dark suits whom he introduced as colleagues, though their bearing suggested they were more likely hired security or medical attendants. The confrontation that followed would be burned into Catherine's memory forever. Dr. Whitmore began by expressing concern about Catherine's mental state and her recent behavior patterns. He spoke in measured, professional tones while the recording equipment captured every word. "Ashworth, your recent test results indicate severe chemical imbalances that are affecting your cognitive function and emotional stability. Combined with the behavioral reports I've received, I believe immediate intervention is necessary." "What behavioral reports? From whom?" Lady Camilla stepped forward, her voice filled with what sounded like genuine anguish. "Catherine, dear, you've been exhibiting paranoid delusions, memory gaps, and aggressive behavior toward people who are trying to help you. We're all terribly worried. I'd like to see these test results and reports," Emma interjected, her voice calm but firm. "As Catherine's sister, I have a right to understand what's being claimed about her mental state." Whitmore's reaction to Emma's request was telling. Instead of producing documentation, he became defensive and suggested that family members weren't qualified to interpret medical information. Furthermore, David added, stepping forward, as a solicitor, I'm curious about the legal authority under which you're proposing to treat someone who appears competent and is explicitly refusing your intervention. The room fell silent as the power dynamic shifted. Lady Camilla and Dr. Whitmore had clearly not anticipated having to justify their actions to witnesses, particularly witnesses with legal knowledge. It was at this moment that Catherine decided to force the truth into the open. Dr. Whitmore, are you aware that someone has been altering my medication? Are you aware that my phone calls have been intercepted and family members told I was too ill to communicate? Catherine, these are exactly the kind of paranoid delusions that indicate how serious your condition has become. Lady Camilla said, but her voice lacked conviction. Then you won't mind if we examine the medication bottles to verify that the pills match the prescription? David suggested. The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Whitmore and Lady Camilla exchanged glances that confirmed Catherine's accusations more clearly than any confession could have done. Emma moved to stand beside her sister, her voice strong and clear. Catherine is not exhibiting any symptoms of mental illness that I can observe. She's been systematically poisoned and psychologically manipulated, and now you're trying to have her committed to cover up what you've done. The recording equipment captured the next 20 minutes of conversation as Lady Camilla's carefully constructed facade crumbled under pressure. Faced with unexpected resistance and the presence of witnesses they couldn't control, the conspirators began making mistakes and contradicting their previous statements. The most damaging moment came when Sir Edmund Pemberton arrived unexpectedly, apparently summoned by Lady Camilla when the situation began deteriorating. His presence confirmed the business motivations behind the conspiracy, and his angry demands that the girl be removed immediately revealed the cold calculation behind months of psychological torture. This has gone on long enough, Sir Edmund declared, his aristocratic composure completely abandoned. William was promised to Victoria, and this middle-class nobody has interfered with plans that were years in the making. William, who had been silent through most of the confrontation, finally spoke. Mother, what is Sir Edmund talking about? What plans? The truth came out in a torrent of accusations and justifications as the carefully constructed conspiracy collapsed under its own weight. Lady Camilla revealed that William's marriage had always been intended as a business arrangement, that Catherine's love for him was seen as an obstacle to family interests, and that removing her was considered a necessary sacrifice for the greater good of both families. Dr. Whitmore attempted to defend his role by claiming he had been told Catherine was genuinely mentally ill, but the evidence of medication tampering and falsified test results contradicted his protestations of innocence. As the afternoon wore on, the recording equipment captured confessions and admissions that would later prove devastating in court. The conspiracy to destroy Catherine's life and marriage was exposed in exhaustive detail, revealing a level of callous calculation that shocked even those who thought they understood the ruthlessness of aristocratic power. William listened to the revelations about his family with growing horror and disbelief. The realization that his mother had been systematically poisoning his wife while convincing him she was mentally ill transformed his shock into rage. "Get out," he told Sir Edmund and Dr. Whitmore, his voice shaking with emotion. "Get out of my home and never come back." Lady Camilla made one final attempt to salvage the situation, appealing to William's sense of family loyalty and tradition. But the evidence of what she had done to Catherine was overwhelming, and her son's loyalty had shifted irrevocably. The police were called, and arrests were made. The recording evidence, combined with the physical evidence of medication tampering and falsified medical records, provided prosecutors with a compelling case against all the conspirators. In the months that followed, the scandal would rock British high society and expose the dark underbelly of aristocratic power and privilege. Lady Camilla, Sir Edmund Pemberton, and Dr. Whitmore would face serious criminal charges, and the business empire they had tried to protect through Catherine's destruction would crumble under the weight of public scrutiny and legal investigation. For Catherine, the victory came at an enormous personal cost. The months of psychological manipulation and medical sabotage had left deep scars that would take years to heal fully. Her marriage to William, though built on genuine love, had to be rebuilt on new foundations of trust and understanding. But she had survived, and in surviving she had exposed a conspiracy that might otherwise have destroyed countless other lives. The courage she had shown in fighting back against seemingly insurmountable odds had not only saved her own life, but had struck a blow against the kind of entitled cruelty that too often operated in the shadows of privilege and power. As she stood in the gardens of Willowbrook Manor weeks later, watching as Lady Camilla's belongings were removed from the home that would no longer be her domain, Catherine reflected on how close she had come to losing everything. The estate would need new management, the family's reputation would need to be rebuilt, and her marriage would require ongoing work to overcome the damage that had been done. But she was free. She was safe, and she had learned that even the most carefully constructed conspiracies could be defeated by courage, intelligence, and the willingness to fight for the truth. The secret emails that had nearly destroyed her life had ultimately become the evidence that saved it, and the manor that had been her prison had become a symbol of her victory over those who had underestimated the strength of the woman they had tried to break.